Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of from Dean Britton Catholic Apologist YouTube channel, defending and explaining the faith. Today is going to actually be a first part of a two-part video series because this is a very controversial topic and it involves a lot of different angles and a lot of information. So we're going to put it into two parts so nobody falls asleep. Hopefully no one would anyway, even if it was one, but it'll be two parts. So the title, this is part one of Who is the Rock of Matthew 16. So I'll just read it here. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatsoever you bind on earth will be bound on heaven. Whatsoever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. It's Matthew 16. So this is a very, very controversial verse. And so many different churches are debating this verse today, which is actually very sad, very ironic, because, well, among many topics, this topic, who is the rock of Matthew 16, this was not debated 2,000 years ago. This was not debated 1,500 years ago. This was not debated 1,000 years ago. Really, this is only debated a couple hundred years ago for the most part. Okay, the first couple hundred years, even 1,000 years, Christianity. Everybody knew who is the rock of Matthew 16. It's quite obvious. Okay, so to answer this question, what we're going to do is we're just going to basically, I guess I'll just kind of discuss both parts of the spectrum. I'll kind of explain the different camps, if you will. So there's the Catholic camp who believes that Peter is the rock of Matthew 16. And then there is the fundamentalist. Actually, I guess there's a third camp. On the opposite end from the Catholic camp is the fundamentalist camp who claim that Jesus himself is the rock of Matthew 16, or perhaps Peter's confession of Jesus is the rock of Matthew 16. Then you have, many Protestant groups somewhere in the middle who say different things. Some of them kind of partly agree with the Catholic position. Some believe certain elements of both. So it's kind of hard to say. There's approximately 20,000 Protestant denominations, so it's really difficult to say. You can't really generalize, but certainly the fundamentalists, who of course I use that term to describe kind of like the more modern day Bible literalists who tend to be very, very anti-Catholic, or what I refer to as fundamentalists. And fundamentalists all disagree that Peter is the rock of Matthew 16. And of course, so there's three different ways we're going to approach this. We're going to go into the early languages of the Bible, okay, and we're also going to go into history, and we're also going to go into the writings of the early church. We're going to see what the early church fathers had to say about this, because they wrote many, many writings about who is the rock of Matthew 16, and it's going to surprise a lot of fundamentalists to read these writings. They're going to be shocked. Now, I've always said that probably 50% of all the topics and issues of debate among Christians could be resolved simply by 50% could be resolved by going into the original languages of the Bible. The other 50% could probably be resolved by basically reading the writings of the apostles and their successors, the writings that are outside of the Bible but still point to the Bible and are often written as commentaries on different parts of the Bible. So as far as getting to the languages, we're not going to dive into the Greek right away, because even the Greek, the different people have different interpretations, which is unfortunate because, of course, the Greek language at the time, could certainly be compared to other literature at the time. But anyway, we're not going to go into the Greek right away. Some people, they'll start with the Greek and then go to the English, or they'll start with the English and go back. What I'm going to do is we're going to go an extra step backward in time. We're going to go back to the Aramaic. That was the language that Jesus was actually speaking at the time. Okay, not even just the Aramaic of today, but the Aramaic, mind you, hasn't changed much, but the Aramaic that Jesus was speaking. Okay, so we're going to begin with that. Now, the Bible was first, at least as far as we know, the Bible, Gospel of Matthew, was first written in Greek, and not just any Greek. Okay, not the Greek that you'd find in Greece today. It was written in what's called Koine Greek, K-O-I-N-E. Okay, now languages evolve over time. English language, no exception. So when we're getting into the Greek of the Bible, we really have to make sure that we're using the Greek that was being used at that time, not 500 years before and not 500 years after, but the Greek at the time. Okay, and of course, there's different ways we can do that. So, but anywho, we're going to begin with the Aramaic, and it just so happens that my beautiful fiance is one of the few people in the world who still speaks and understands this ancient language. She's fluent in Aramaic and Arabic too, but it's the Aramaic that I find particularly fascinating. So we're going to begin with the Aramaic. Now, Jesus was speaking to the apostles, and he asked the question. Okay, Peter answered the question. Now, what's very interesting is that the gospel, even though it was written in Greek, actually preserved a piece of the Aramaic. It says, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar Jonah." Bar Jonah, Aramaic for son of. So, blessed art thou, Simon, son of Jonah. Now, what's very interesting is that Simon's name in the Aramaic language, his first name, his original name, Simon, meant reed. R-E-E-D, a reed. Kind of those brown things you see at the edge of the lake or the edge of the seashore, those brown kind of grassy things, they flop with the wind, right? They move. They have no, they're weak. They get blown around with the wind. His name, Simon's name, literally meant reed. How about that? But what's so cool is that Simon is one of the few people in the New Testament that gets his name changed by Jesus. Now, even the most ignorant Christian, even the most bigoted Christian who attacks other faiths, would admit that when God changes someone's name in the Bible, it's very, very significant. Okay, He doesn't just do it because He feels like it. It's represents a tremendous change of that person, tremendous impartation of graces or anointing or blessing or power, authority. So Jesus changed Simon's name from Simon to Kepa. Okay, Kepa in the Aramaic means rock. It suggests like a large, immovable rock, one you can't just pick up with your hands. See, that's very phenomenal because his name previously meant reed. So Simon to Kepa, reed to rock. Jesus changed his name from reed to rock. Okay, now bear that in mind for when we move into the Greek. Okay, so speaking to Peter, Jesus would have basically said, "Blessed art thou, Simon, son of Jonah. For flesh and blood does not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. I say to you that you are now Kepa, and on this Kepa I will build my church." Why do we believe that Jesus was saying that? Say Kepa? Well, there's no, because there's, why do we believe that is significant? Well, to change from reed to rock, I'd say is extremely significant, especially considering he didn't change his name from reed to grass or from reed to leaf or from reed to tree bark. He changed his name from reed to rock. So that in itself is very profound. Okay? So then, of course, the Bible got translated from the Aramaic and written down first in Koine Greek. Okay, so in the Greek now we actually see two different words. And this has given rise to tremendous confusion. And of course, fundamentalists intent on attacking the Catholic Church have tried to make these two different Greek words seem like that it's a contradiction or that it means different things. In Greek it says, "You are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my church, my ecclesiastica." Okay, now some people think that Petros and Petra are two very different words. They're not. Okay, you have to understand something. The Greek language, like Spanish and many other languages, the Greek language has masculine and feminine. Okay, so when the Peter's name Kepa, which I said means rock in Aramaic, and by the way, that's not up to speculation, that is fact. You go into any Aramaic dictionary, it'll say rock, Kepa. Okay, and my fiance, who's fluent in Aramaic, also can confirm this for anybody. So you are rock. So now when it got translated into Greek, that Kepa became Petros, okay, because Jesus was speaking, okay, to a man, Petros. Now, and he says, "On this Petra," which is feminine, "I'll build my church." Now, you need to understand something. In the Greek language at the time, Petra meant, was feminine, okay, so like a rock is, even in the Spanish language, the Spanish word for large rock is piedra. Matter of fact, I was driving from Guadalajara to Puerto Vallarta one day, and I saw a big sign, and it said, "Peligroso piedras," meant danger, falling rocks. Even the Spanish language, they know that piedra, Petra, feminine for rock. So why does it not say, "You are Petra, and upon this Petra I will build my church"? And the reason being is because Peter was a man, and Jesus had to, was the writer in the Greek was acknowledging the linguistic rules that, you can't You have to be consistent, right? So he was saying, you are a rock male, and on this rock I'll build my church. So there is no difference between Petros and Petra. Now, some fundamentalists will say, oh, but according to we found some writings where there seems to be a distinction. Like Petros seems to be like a kind of a smaller, like edge of a cliff, and Petra is a really big thing. Well, you know what? That was about 500 years before Koine was written, and it was confined mostly to poetry. Even some famous Protestant scholars like J. and D. Kelly said that distinction between Petros and Petra was gone by the time the gospel was written. It's clear in the Koine Greek of the time that Petros and Petra were just masculine and feminine forms of the same thing, which means rock, large, immovable rock. And I can prove from a different verse that Jesus was not calling Peter a little pebble or stone or something, okay? Now, on that note, there are some people who think, they say, well, Peter can't be the rock, because the Bible, New Testament, there's a couple passages where in 1 Peter it says, that Jesus mentions Jesus being a rock, refers to him as a steady rock, and a chief cornerstone is another popular one. So they say that Peter cannot be the rock because Jesus is the rock, and two people can't be the rock. Well, to my fundamentalist brethren, I'm going to say this as gently and lovingly and humbly as I can. There's this thing called homonyms, which you really might want to look into, okay? There are many, many homonyms in the Bible, okay? There are different words used with different meanings, okay? And it's so dreadfully obvious. It does not matter what language you read the Bible in, there are homonyms, okay? For example, in the Old Testament, and again, you will never hear a fundamentalist admit this, at least I haven't. In the Old Testament, Abraham is referred to as a rock. In the New Testament, it's true, Jesus is referred to as a rock, and even referred to as the chief cornerstone, okay? But you need to understand something, okay? The word rock is used in different contexts here. Abraham was the rock in the sense of being the father of the Jewish people. Jesus is the rock and the cornerstone of the faith, and he's the rock and the cornerstone of our salvation, okay? But that takes nothing away from Peter being the rock of the church, the rock upon which the church would be built in Matthew 16, okay? So declaring that Peter is the rock of Matthew 16 takes nothing away from Jesus, just like it takes nothing away from Abraham in the Old Testament, okay? Same word, different applications, okay? Jesus himself said, translated, from the Aramaic, say, you are rock, and on this very rock, meaning you, Peter, upon you, I'm going to build my church. The Aramaic proves it, the Koine Greek proves it, even in English, it's obvious. I mean, if Jesus was saying upon your confession, he just would have said, and on your confession, I'm going to build my church. He says, I'm building it on you. Even in English, it's obvious that Peter is the rock of Matthew 16. And a little bit later, I'm going to prove it with a selection of numerous writings of the early church fathers and apostles and saints and doctors of the church who so many times, like they mention Peter, they even call him the rock, Kepa. It's so obvious. There's even a preserved writing from St. Peter himself where he acknowledges that he is the rock of Matthew 16, meaning the rock that the church shall be built upon. And I think that's enough here for part 1, and we'll continue this video on part 2. Thanks a lot for watching. God bless.